Thank you, Ellen. I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Wayne Stiles. Um, and I'm looking at our history, Wayne. I think that we were in the U.S. Navy around the same time. I'm assuming you went in as an ensign, although the first reference to your officer status is as lieutenant junior grade when you were on board the USS Liberty. Um, that's as far as I got in the Navy, was lieutenant junior grade, and then they took that away from me. So welcome tonight. I see from your history you were aboard the USS Liberty and were part of a helicopter crew evacuating the ship, and then served in Vietnam, and then served in the FBI and were one of the investigators of the Watergate break-in. So welcome to Veterans for Peace tonight, Wayne.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you. I will sort of correct a couple of your statements. I was part of a Navy helicopter detachment, which was headquartered in NAS Lakehurst, New Jersey. And we were aboard the USS America, the aircraft carrier. And we were there for utility purposes and also to fly plane guard, which would be circling next to the carrier when they were launching and recovering aircraft. So I was not attached to the Liberty. I, in fact, took part in the evacuation of wounded from the Liberty the very next morning. I was the co-pilot on the first helicopter to reach the Liberty the following morning. I can go
Thank
on.
you.
Uh, we basically brought the wounded back to the aircraft carrier because they had a very large medical facility on board. And two helicopters from our detachment made the evacuations. And there was also some anti-submarine helicopters on the USS America. So they joined in after we had made the initial contact. Would you like to ask me some questions, or would you like me to narrate what
Oh,
happened?
I'm sorry. I I thought you would do a presentation and
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
and then we could ask
Yeah,
questions of you.
not a problem.
Okay.
On the afternoon of June 8th, 1967, we were all called to a detachment meeting, and the ship's air boss, the man who ran air operations on the USS America, had asked our officer in charge if we could fly to the USS Liberty, start some rescues, and return, whether we had enough fuel to do that.
Can you hear?
We did not. So the USS America steamed towards the Liberty all night long. And the following morning, we took off. And about an hour of flight time got us over the USS Liberty. We circled the ship. There was no place to land. It was so shot up. There were holes everywhere, debris everywhere. Most of the bridge was gone, had been shot away. So we hovered over the bow and we sent one of our crewmen down to the deck on the hoist. And the crewman would attach, we had a sling and some other uh, equipment that enabled us to bring the wounded up to the helicopter while we were hovering. While we were hovering, I was not flying, I was simply calling out the power settings. The pilot in charge was flying, I was the co pilot. I was also on the side where the hoist was, so I could observe what was going on deck, and I could observe the people coming up to the back of the helicopter and the crewmen bringing them in. So I happened to glance down while we were in our hover, and I looked, there was a gun tub on the bow of the Liberty where there formerly was a 50 caliber machine gun. The floor of the gun tub was covered in blood. The blood and seawater was sloshing back and forth as the ship rolled. I just was shocked by that. I didn't know really what I was looking at because we didn't know who had made the attack at that point. It was all a mystery. So we were bringing wounded up, and I was calling out the power to the pilot. Now, to give you an analogy, if you're in a four-cylinder car, for instance, and you're going up a very steep hill, and you're pretty underpowered. In other words, you've got the uh, gas pedal to the floor, and what happens if it's too tall? Your speed decreases. You start off at 60, and you're at 50, and you're at 40, and you're giving it as much power as you can. Well, that's what happened to us. The more people we brought up, the slower our rotors were spinning because we were at maximum power. So we got down to 92% of actual rotor speed. And the tail rotor, which runs off of the main gearbox, we lose our tail rotor at 89. So we were in danger of crashing and had to send one wounded person down to the deck. What we didn't know at the time was that we had set up our rescue into the wind. The wind was coming off the starboard bow, so we were all set up. We didn't know that the ship was in a starboard turn because its rudder had been damaged. So we were being taken out of the wind as the ship went to the right. The wind was over to our left, but we didn't know that. So we I was very fortunate that I was in with one of the best pilots in the squadron because he was able to, at 92% power, rotor, he was able to move the helicopter off and build the rotors back up by turning a little bit at a time into the wind. And somehow we made it out of there that first trip. So, and then we realized what the situation was, and we didn't get ourselves in trouble like that again. So all I can say is that it was a mission for me, like so many more missions. We didn't know who the attacker was. Everyone was saying it was the Arabs that attacked the Liberty. And it was only after we got back to the ship and were there for a while, we realized it was Israel that had attacked the Liberty. So fast forward, I go through I finish my cruise, I complete my missions, I'm back in Lakehurst. I then go out on the USS Intrepid to Vietnam. We were on the ship for about 8 months. And then in September of 69, I left the Navy. My 5 year obligation was over. And I ended up going into the FBI in late 1970. And after finishing training school, we didn't have Quantico in those days. We had the old post office building, which eventually was changed into a hotel in President Trump's first term. But that's where we went through our FBI training in the old post office building. So after that, I was sent to, after I got my certification and my badge and all that, I was assigned. My wife and I were assigned to Tampa and then Orlando and then Miami. I was in Miami for just a little over a year, and Watergate hit, and the violation happened to be on our squad. In fact, I think I'm the only living agent from that squad at this point. They were all older than I was. I was a new guy, but it was just quite an experience working that case. I was in on a few good interviews, and uh, I'll get back to the Liberty. But the interesting thing about that case is I was assigned to try to find one of their vehicles, which was unaccounted for because all of the people that did the break-in were from Miami. They were Cubans. They were people, some of them were veterans of the Bay of Pigs, if you remember, the Cuban invasion. And so I went out to the airport with a first office agent, and we were driving through all of the parking lots, and we found the car. And in the back of the car, in the trunk, was the deposit slip for the $25,000 that the Nixon reelection campaign had sent to Miami to finance the break-ins. So you can see that kind of broke the case wide open. It kind of linked all of the people that committed the crime with the committee to reelect the president. So anyway, I finished a career which was mostly in financial investigations, Medicare fraud. I did some organized crime cases in Miami, and we found ourselves in Tallahassee in 1996, taking care of my mother-in-law, who was elderly at the time. I became friendly with a retired U.S. Air Force U-2 pilot, and we used to play golf together. And he said, "Oh, you know about the Liberty? Did you hear about how Israel did that intentionally?" And I said, "No, I never heard that." And so he introduced me to a book which I think everyone who wanted to know about the Liberty should read. It's called Body of Secrets. It's written by James Bamford. That's B as in boy, A, M Mary, Ford. He's an NSA retire. I think he worked for the NSA for a short time. He has two full chapters on the Liberty. He went ahead and requested under the Freedom of Information Act records from the NSA, and he got them, and he used them to write his book. The government found out that he had gotten these records, and they tried to classify them retroactively. They tried to keep him from publishing and tried to get the records back. And they went to court, and Bamford won. And then after that, all of the records were classified top secret. Now, what most people don't know and don't talk about uh, is that at the same time that the Liberty was being attacked, the NSA had a Boeing 707, which the government name for it was an EC 121, which was a listening, it's like the USS Liberty, but with wings. They had all of the devices in there. They were listening to every single radio transmission before, during, and after the 6 Days War. There are complete records of what all the pilots said, what their headquarters were saying to them, what the ship was saying, and they're all highly classified and have never been allowed to see the light of day. It'll be 60 years in 2027 that all of those records and documents have been uh, classified top secret. I took part in a documentary which you all should take a look at. It's called Sacrificing Liberty. It's a four-part docuseries, and you can find it at ussliberty.org. It's free to watch, and you're going to find out that there is a very good case for our president, LBJ, in a conspiracy with Israel to sink the Liberty in order to bring us into the war on Israel's side. Let that sink in. I will read you something from a book called, this is an author that wrote a book about the Liberty. Listen to this. Jim Nanjo was a navigation radar officer who served aboard B-52 bombers attached to the 744 Bomb Squadron, Beale Air Force Base, Northern California. In the early morning of June 8th, 1967, he was awakened by warning horns. He scrambled aboard his aircraft, which then taxied to the end of the runway and sat there for 4 to 6 hours. All of that happened between 2 and 4 a.m. on June 8th, 1967. The crew broke open a classified packet containing operational codes. Nanjo confirmed to the author that his aircraft was carrying thermonuclear weapons, H bombs, that morning. There was one significance to Nanjo's story. His actions that morning had taken place between 2 and 4 a.m. He was certain it was no later. But the Liberty was not attacked until 5 a.m. California time. How were the American military and its commander, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, able to anticipate the attack on the Liberty and not know the Israelis were behind it? That's just one excerpt from Operation Cyanide, which is a book by Peter Hunam, Houn Nancy A.M. Mary, Hunam. He spent 2 years researching this book. Constructs a very, very powerful case for LBJ being into some kind of conspiracy with Israel to allow us to bomb Egypt. The attack aircraft that left the USS America and the USS Saratoga the day of the attack, they had nuclear weapons. They were called back when they were 6 minutes from Cairo. So you can see how close we came to nuclear war that day because the Russians were supporting the Arabs. Now, let me tell you what they did after the attack was over. The US military made the Liberty, in a highly damaged condition, steam all the way to Malta. Malta was a British base. They put the boat in dry dock. They covered up all of the holes. There was over 1,000 shell holes and cannon holes. They completely repainted the whole ship so that the American people wouldn't see the damage. They said that they would be prosecuted under military law if they said anything about the attack to anyone, even their families. They even threatened family members with with being prosecuted if they spoke of what they might have known about the attack. So the whole thing was kind of covered up by both countries from the get-go. All this stuff I found out later on from my own research, and anyone can find out the same thing. The Israelis have repeatedly tried to blame the attack on a mistake that they mistook the ship for an Egyptian ship. It's called the Egyptian ship is the El Qasir. The El Qasir was 255 feet long. The Liberty was 545 feet long. The El Qasir was one third of the tonnage of the Liberty. The Liberty was covered with antennas. The El Qasir was a horse carrier. That's it, HORSE carrier. And it was confirmed that that ship was tied up in El Arish on the near the Sinai Peninsula, all during the attack. So the whole thing was just a put up job as far as saying it. The international emergency frequencies so that the ship could not call for help. Every single one of its radio frequencies was inoperable. They machine gunned medical people who were on deck treating wounded. They machine gunned life rafts that they launched when they thought they were going to sink. They used napalm. All of that was against international law, by the way. The ship was attacked when it was 17 miles offshore in international waters. It was never closer to the Sinai than 13 miles, which is still outside the international watermark. But nevertheless, it was attacked. So many U.S. officials, based on the books I've read, the videos I've watched, there's a lot of U.S. officials that never agreed with the Israeli explanation. There was only a 3-day cursory investigation. Remember when one of our ships was attacked in Yemen by terrorists? That investigation took 6 months, and they lost only half the number of people. Anybody in Israel as part of the investigation? The whole thing was put to bed rather quickly, and there's never been a concerted investigation by the United States into the death of 34 American sailors and the wounding of 171. Last year, the veterans had their 58th anniversary in what we all know is a big Navy town, Norfolk, Virginia. One of the local papers there went on a tirade against the veterans, calling them racist and anti-Semites and Israeli haters. And there were phoned in threats, physical threats to their safety. The threats were so vile that the hotel staff would not come to work for fear they would be hurt. This little group of valiant veterans, the USS Liberty organization, had to come up with $15,000 to hire additional security and additional servers to serve them meals and their buffet and all that, because none of the hotel people would come to work out of fear. So it's been an ongoing process for them to maintain their independence and try to get the truth out. You can see personal interviews. You can watch Sacrificing Liberty at that site for free. If you are very persistent, you can find Operation Cyanide by Peter Hunam, and you can read that, and you'll come away with the idea that maybe all is not as it seemed. in the aftermath of the attack on the Liberty. The Israelis offered about $7.5 million for the Liberty. The Liberty, who knows what it was worth back then, but they had added $30 million worth of electronics before it even went to the Mediterranean. The Israelis balked at I'm sorry, they didn't offer. The U.S. wanted 7.5 million. The Israelis balked at excuse me at paying that much, and they negotiated with the U.S. for 13 years before they finally paid $6 million during the Carter administration. They paid the families of the dead a small amount of money, each family. I don't know what the exact amount was, but it wasn't very much. So unless you have any questions, that's. I mean, I have a lot of information, but it's all things that I've read and become aware of secondhand. So I can answer any questions you all might have.
Thank you. Um, would you raise your hands, folks? And nobody told me I was on mute. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you very much for having me.
And wait, we do have some questions. Nick, go ahead.
Yes. Do you feel, I don't know how many times you've made this presentation, but do you feel that there's more interest and more urgency around people reflecting on this now? I mean, how do you think about this in relation to what we see now going on with this genocide? Do you see a connection in some fashion?
Yes, well, that's very perceptive. Um, I see what happened to the Liberty to be somewhat in line with the governmental actions that are going on over in Palestine at the present time. It seems that there's always an excuse for why things are done or done the way they are, or there's no explanation, and the public be damned. The thing that I'm driven by, I mean, I was a rescue pilot. I wasn't injured. I didn't suffer the loss of a family member or even an acquaintance. But I realized that there is a couple of generations, maybe several, that don't have any idea that this even happened. Older people like us, we look back and we say, "Oh yeah, I remember there was an attack back then. I don't remember much about it though." But I have written 4 articles on Medium.com, and I have commented regularly on Substack. I don't have an account there. I don't publish. I just comment. And every time I make a comment about the Liberty, it's restacked and reread. And I think probably so far I've had a couple of hundred people read my postings in Substack, and they all seem to actually happen 60 hung on today in 2025 and 26. So I consider it to be my mission. I'm 84 years old. Okay. I'm getting towards the last roundup, so to speak. And I consider it my mission to make it to their 60th anniversary next year in June of 2027. And hopefully I'll be around and my wife and I can go.
Thank you,
And
Wayne. I think,
thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you all.
thank you. We have another question for you, Todd Pierce.
Yeah, forgive me if I missed this, but so you didn't know uh, immediately that Israel was behind this, but were you hearing, scuttlebutt, as we used to call it, amongst other sailors, other pilots, or the people you rescued that, hey, it was Israel that attacked us?
I did not. Um, First of all, realize my position. I was a co-pilot. So, and you're a brand new Lieutenant JG, and you're like on the bottom of the rung, bottom rung of the totem pole, so to speak. So they didn't really loop us in on everything, but I know for a fact that there were a lot of upset jet pilots that when they were recalled, they landed because they weren't able to defend the Liberty. They were recalled from their mission to defend the Liberty while it was still under attack. When they found out that the Liberty was being attacked by Israel, LBJ called back all of the aircraft. He told one of the generals, I think, he said, "I don't care if I don't care about a couple of sailors and the Liberty sinking. I'm not going to embarrass our ally Israel." Now, this man told Peter Hunam that quote from LBJ, and he said, "Please don't use it until I have died." And he did not use that until he was sure that the man had passed away, and then he used it in his book. So it's only I guess after a period of time they realized that it was Israel because the somebody crawled out under fire and put a wire on one of the only masts that was still standing. That's how the Saratoga and the America knew that the Liberty was under attack. They had a very weak call saying under attack, unknown attackers, USS Liberty, position, whatever. And that's when they launched aircraft, but they were called back. Now, some of them were nuclear armed, and their target was Cairo, and they were called back.
Thanks for keeping this history alive and sharing it with us. Am I muted?
Yes, thank you very much. What
Yeah.
I would love to see all of the people here, take a little time and go to the website of the USS Liberty and get acquainted with these guys. I mean, they're just a nice bunch of guys, and they've really been up against it all these years, and every year a few more of them die, and they keep plugging away trying to get an investigation and get the record cleared. So, yes, sir.
Hi, Wayne, thank you so much
Wayne,
for
is
this.
it Tarek or Ellen?
It's
You're
Tara.
entirely welcome. Thank you.
It's Tara.
Tarek?
Uh, yeah, thanks so much,
Okay,
Wayne.
go
Thanks
ahead.
for coming here and thanks for sharing all of that. I do have a question. I'm somewhat familiar with the USS Liberty. We had one of their guys come here when I lived in Woodstock, and he did a presentation, and I read about it, and we posted some articles about it in our newspaper, which is Peace and Planet
Uh-huh.
News, which is a good
Well,
newspaper.
uh, they were going to last year, I believe it was early in the year, they were going to name a new ship that came out of Maine. They were going to name it for the USS Liberty, and Israel put pressure on our government, and they changed the name.
I'm sure Israel. So
All
I
right, it's a
wanted
pleasure
to ask
talking to all
you,
you.
but I wanted to ask you, so you put in some serious time. You put 5 years in the military, and then
Correct.
quite a few years with the FBI. So all that was sort of government work. When you found out about, and you saw and you experienced, by the way, I wanted to ask you also another question. How many injured did you actually take off the Liberty? But when you found out about what had actually happened, how did that make you feel about this whole system that does stuff like that? That has been responsible
Well,
for
look, I feel the same way all of you do, and I listened to all of you at the beginning. Uh, it's a shame when there's power politics everywhere, and the little people more or less have to sit quietly and accept what their governments do. As a matter of fact, do you remember the Gulf of Tonkin
of course.
situation where in 1964, there was supposed to be some kind of a attack by North Korean gunboats on two destroyers.
Hmm.
And that was basically LBJ's excuse to ramp up the Vietnam conflict. He sent thousands of more troops over after that. Well, NSA sometime later did a full examination of that whole situation and labeled it a fraud, a hoax. Never happened. So yeah, it's sad. It's sad what's going on these days, and I'm in your camp, and I went to the No Kings demonstration last year, and that's where I happened to meet a gentleman who was in Veterans for Peace here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he said, "Go ahead and visit their website." I was being interviewed by one of the local TV stations as he walked by and yelled at me, and I said, I'll check it out." So I did, and that's
That's
why I'm
great. Well, we have someone from North Carolina on the call right now,
here
Doug Ryder.
today.
I don't know who's the fellow that spoke to you, but
Wayne, you're part of our chapter 157. I have you on our listserv, but you haven't joined Veterans for Peace. You need to do that through the national. And I sent you information. I can send it to you again if you'd
Cool,
like, but it's
cool.
fairly simple and straightforward. DD
Okay,
214, you know, couple bucks.
I'll check my old emails. I might have missed something.
I will resend you where to go.
I'm sorry, is that Doug Ryder from North Carolina?
Yes.
That is.
that's the
Good.
All
Doug
right,
Good to
thank
Ryder.
you
see you,
very much.
Thank
Susan.
I
you.
appreciate it.
We
Yeah.
have a couple more hands up, so
Okay,
don't
sorry,
stop
I
yet.
have
We got
not a
more
real
questions.
estate. I said, wait, I hear, just one second. Okay. Doug Ryder, you're done. Todd Pierce, you have your hand up again, and then Bob Kyle back.
So very quickly, I put a couple links into James Bamford articles in the chat box, which are well worth reading. But I spent the day in the Barry Goldwater archives at ASU. And let's not forget that there's a two-party system. And these people in the Republicans like Barry Goldwater are absolutely fanatical for war back then, making LBJ look like a pacifist almost. So let's not forget that, because there's so much historical revisionism going on now to rewrite history that the right wing were the peacemakers, which is, of course, absolute bullshit, as we all know.
Well, the documentary you may want to find is on Al Jazeera. 2014, they did the first documentary on the USS Liberty. And I went and visited that when I first talked with that U-2 pilot. And in that Al Jazeera documentary, they say that Israel had four sources of information within the LBJ government, very close to him. They all had code names, and they were reporting back to Israel everything that the U.S. government was contemplating to do about the USS Liberty. So it's in that documentary. It's a very good documentary, but it's an earlier one than Sacrificing Liberty.
Thank, thank you. I see James and Todd. Okay, James, are you next? And I just want to say a special thank you to James and Todd for all of the wonderful dialogue that you've had regarding your proposal. I have passed it on to Kathy Gilbart, who is going to take a look at it and get back to us in terms of what the National Legal Task Force is going to do. So thank you both. Go ahead, James.
Thank you for that, Susan. I did have a question about that for later. Um, Wayne, I wonder the classified documents that you mentioned that were immediately classified as top secret. Is there an expiration date on that classification? Do you know?
I don't have any answers to that. I really don't know. And the only thing I have heard is that if you make a FOIA request now, they say the documents, there are no such documents. That's what somebody, one of the veterans said. Let me read you what Admiral Thomas H. Maurer said about the Liberty situation. I have never believed that the attack on the USS Liberty was a case of mistaken identity. That is ridiculous. Israel knew perfectly well that the ship was American. After all, the Liberty's American flag and markings were in full view, in perfect visibility for the Israeli aircraft that overflew the ship 8 times over the period over a period of nearly 8 hours prior to the attack. I have to conclude that it was Israel's intent to sink the USS Liberty and leave as few survivors as possible. Admiral Thomas H. Maurer, U.S. Navy, retired. They overflew the Liberty all that morning with photographers. The men on deck were waving to the pilots. One plane was so low, it almost hit one of their masts. It was like 200 feet. And they overflew them several times, taking photographs. The pilots waved at the Liberty crewmen that were on deck. There were people, going about their duties, but there were also guys sunning themselves because they were off duty. And as they went by, they were waving at the pilots, and the pilots were waving back to them. They thought Israel, well, they didn't know it was Israel, but they figured it was because the planes didn't have the insignia. But, I mean, they were just flabbergasted when they came under fire.
Thank you, Wayne.
Any more?
Alice.
Yeah, Wayne, thank you for what you're telling us. But what you're telling us is like the tip of this horrible iceberg that's now in full view with the genocide in Gaza, totally enabled by the United States. Just like you speculate that Lyndon Johnson enabled that attack on the American boat. I mean, like we're in our military, corrupt military forces in America, the Republicrats. It's not Democrat or Republican. It's all of them. They're in bed with Israel as their guard dog for the Middle East. To get the oil in Iran, and now we're starting war with Iran. It's just like this was something we didn't know about. Now we know about it, but it's mixed in with this new horror. And the question is, what do we do about our country and Israel? I mean, how do we address this? I mean,
Good
he's
question.
starting another United Nations in Gaza. He's totally undercutting the UN right now. I mean, everything is up for grabs. I think our peace movement needs a brainstorm.
Speaking privately as a citizen, I agree 100%. I mean, if you look at the number of politicians that are supported by AIPAC, I mean, some of them have gotten over $1 million, a million five, and when you're getting that kind of money to support, your candidacy and whatever else, it's hard to go against. It's hard to be independent when you're getting that amount of money from a foreign source, and they don't seem to be able to do anything about it. Um, the fact that the U.S. agreed to cover up the attack on the Liberty is astounding.
And they're the only ones that vetoed a ceasefire in the UN twice to stop the genocide in Gaza.
Right,
the
right.
US is the only one selling arms for that war. In other words,
That's right.
the US has been enabling Israel from the very beginning to do
Well,
all these bad
you want to
things.
hear something that should make everybody angry? They decided to give the Congressional Medal of Honor to the USS Liberty's captain, Captain McGonigal. But before they did it, we asked the Israeli ambassador if Israel would be offended if we gave the captain the Congressional Medal of Honor. The Congressional Medal of Honor was presented to the captain not by the president, but by the Secretary of the Navy at the Washington Navy Yard, not in public, not in a big ceremony, but privately so as not to anger Israel. Meanwhile, Israel took the helm, they call it the wheel, the helm and the bell from the attacking PT, one of the attacking PT boats, and put it in their naval museum. They have a statue in Israel which commemorates the attack, Israel attacking the Liberty. That's, I mean, that just amazes me.
Just shows what's happening. And that the US is part of it.
Pardon?
The US is enabling it. I mean, Israel has nuclear weapons that we never talk about. We go nuts
I
over
agree.
North Korea, we go nuts over Iran, but Israel, it's big secret. We don't even let it be discussed, you know. So I don't know what to do about it. Help.
All right. Well, thank you very
You're
much.
right, Alan.
It's been a pleasure.
Let me just ask Ellen. Thank you. Ellen, did you want to
Wayne,
ask
again,
something?
Wayne,
It's Tarek.
Wayne,
Oh,
I
Tarek.
want to thank you again. I'll be in touch with you via email. I'm interested in some of those articles that you say you've written. And I'm going to
Okay.
be in touch with you, and then I'm going to send you one of our papers.
Okay.
The
Thank you.
newspaper, so you can
Thank you.
take a look at it. And then
All right. Goodbye, all.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Wayne,
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming tonight. And for telling us so much about the story of the USS Liberty.
You're welcome.
I think a
You're
lot
very
of us
welcome.
who have been very involved in stopping the American war in Vietnam are familiar with what happened off the coast of North Vietnam and that ghost attack that in fact enabled Lyndon Johnson to send in the Marines to Da Nang. So again, thank you. And he left us?
He did.
And yeah.
Oh, okay.
What a story.
Thank you. Okay. Kind of ghosted. That was a really wonderful explanation about what happened 1967, the USS Liberty. So